Something resembling answers, maybe? Let's talk some Chiefs, guys. Welcome to the Chief of the North Mailbag Thursdays, or just the Chief of the North Thursdays, depending on how you want to cut it. I am Seth Keysor, the Chief of the North. You guys know the story. You know who I am. You know what I do. There's very little time. There's a lot of stuff to talk about. As you might notice, I am not in my usual surrounding. I'm not in my usual setup. I don't have my usual comforts. And so we're going to make do with what we can. However, it's not all bad because as you'll be able to see shortly after you see the blinding light, this week's edition of the mailbag is coming at you from a beautiful location on a beautiful lake as I attend a continuing legal education conference. What that does mean, though, is I'm getting a late start. It does mean that I didn't bring my mic because I'm not a smart man. So we're going to do what we can. We're going to have a little bit of an abbreviated session. I'm going to answer a few of your mailbag questions. I'm going to talk a little bit about the article that I wrote yesterday regarding what went wrong, looking at all 31 of the Chiefs' failed offensive plays. Let's get to some mailbag questions first. Let's do it right away. Let's do it fast. Let's hit them hard. You're going to notice that I don't have my usual 3-screen setup, but I've got a beautiful lake next to me, so I'm okay with it. All right. You guys know the drill. You give me your mailbag questions on Twitter when I ask for them, or put them in the comment section here. I owe you all an apology because the comment section here I'm not going to get to today because I don't have my usual multi-screen setup. Hopefully you'll forgive me. Again, the day job, sometimes it makes me do things that I don't feel like doing. You know, maybe one day if RGR football becomes big enough, RGR might be already. Hey, Ryan, give me a raise. Okay, sorry. Maybe one day the Chief of the North newsletter will be my only job, and then I won't have to deal with some of these setbacks. So we'll see what happens. So let's get to the mailbag. Let's get moving. Adam Jensen says, as not a film guy, it seems like we have two superficially contradictory problems. Pat hunts the big plays too much, misses some checkdowns, but some of our checkdowns are bad and design failure. Why not more 10 to 20-yard stuff? You're talking about targeting the intermediate zone of the field more often. Basically, the goal of any NFL team is to figure out how to successfully exploit that intermediate zone. And so I would just say this. I don't think the check down stuff, as you framed it, is designed for failure. It's just generally speaking, when you hit the check down, it's because the play design has failed. And usually NFL teams are pretty good about having someone there with a linebacker or a safety ready to close in on that check down. Because safety valves, they all kind of look the same, honestly. You got a running back in the flat, maybe a running back right underneath. And NFL teams know to look for that. Mahomes does hunt the big play a little bit too much, but it also is something that he tends to just say when he's trying to take the blame for other failures that occurred around him. So there's kind of a both and going on there. John S. in Idaho says, Seth, tell us how you started to follow the Chiefs and what directed you to being an analyst. That's a story that I've written about in depth before. You can find that actually on The Athletic, where I broke down Joe Montana's drive against the Broncos at Mile High Stadium. That's basically what did it. I lived in Kansas City, or right outside of Kansas City, for about 3 years during the Montana Magic era when my dad was attending seminary at Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City. This is before the time where you could watch the Vikings anywhere, and he's a big Vikings fan. So he kind of adopted the Chiefs a little bit because he had a lot of respect for Montana. He liked Derek Thomas. He liked Marty. And so those were the games that we would watch together. And honestly, my dad was attending seminary at the time, and he was working full time as well. He would go to seminary all day, and then he was a janitor all night at his school. I'm not sure. People ask me when I sleep. I'm not sure when he slept. Looking back, I really wasn't a fan of football yet. I just wanted to spend time with my dad. But I remember watching those games, and that Montana Magic at Mile High, we were jumping around our living room and freaking out and screaming it, and I was hooked. And how I became an analyst was essentially just living in Minnesota. I didn't have a ton of people to talk Chiefs with. So, you start looking online, and this is when, Arrowhead Pride was just taking off. And, I looked in, forums for the KC Star. Remember those? Maybe some of you do. Woo! And I just wanted to talk Chiefs with some people. I've always enjoyed writing, and so I'd write little fan posts and about things like that. And honestly, it just kind of snowballed. The more I talked about football, and the more I wrote about it, the more I wanted to know. So I started asking people that are a lot smarter than me questions about how the game works. And Matt Castle was kind of the catalyst for everything, like seeing how wrong I got it because he had what was like a 27 touchdown, 7 interception, or 10 interception year. I can't remember exactly how much. And I was so wrong about him because of basic statistical analysis. And that made me okay. I don't want to be someone who judges players based on the wrong stuff anymore. I want to figure out how this all works. So I started asking different questions, and really people ask me all the time about, NFL analysis. It's like anything else, any other problem. You ask yourself, what question am I really trying to answer here? And how would I answer that question? And that's how the way that I chart quarterback information has come into be, the way that I chart offensive line play and that kind of stuff. I'm asking, what did this player do on any given play? What matters about that position? And then you just figure it out. So that's a very short, condensed version of how that came to be. John Walge, sorry, man. Is it time for a new offensive mind? Not trying to overact, but I feel like a new voice with new ideas is needed to refresh the offense. I would give it a couple weeks. I mean, the Chargers have a really good defense, or at least they seemed like they did. After all the injuries they've suffered, they look like crud, but what are you going to do? I would give it a couple weeks. Let's just see. The Chiefs have had a top 3 DVOA offense every year since Patrick Mahomes came in. And the year before with Alex Smith, they were pretty high up there too. It's pretty premature. I mean, an offense that's been elite year after year after year after year for 4 straight years. Let's give it a minute. We'll see how it goes. We'll see whether or not they really did need Hill as badly as he thinks they needed him. Maybe he was right. Steven Acton says, it seems like OBJ and Trey Smith are playing hurt. I understand the tackle depth is not great, but why didn't Casey sit Smith the last 2 games? Because offensive linemen play hurt is the short story. They play hurt all the time. And it's just a matter of whether or not you believe, 70% or 80% of Trey Smith is better than 100% of Nick Allegretti, which I don't know. But honestly, generally speaking, in the NFL, you usually play through injury unless you literally can't play. Then you don't. It's not usually a matter of, I can't be quite as effective as I'd like. Should they consider it differently? Sometimes I think so. But that's the way the NFL is, and that's the way it's always been, honestly. Zach Agras, how badly do the Chiefs miss Blake Bell right now? They do miss him a little bit because some of the stuff they do to protect does rely on Bell and some of their larger sets. They really enjoy utilizing him as a blocker. What's the latest in his return to play? No idea. There haven't been a ton of updates on him, unfortunately. Carnivore by that's a funny name. Sorry, the allergies. For those of you who listen to Times Ours, you know that the allergies are getting to me each and every day, and today is no exception. Carnivore by Birth, which is a hilarious name, says, at some point it seems like Andy will have to play Sky, as in Sky Moore. Where in the schedule should we set the over-under? Game 11? I have no idea, but I'm frustrated. McCole Hardman's playing hurt, and he hasn't been particularly effective. It's a frustrating thing. I understand Andy has the way that he works in rookie wide receivers. I mean, crud, even Tyreek Hill saw limited snaps and types of routes his rookie year, but it's very frustrating to watch, especially, they got a guy in the second round. He's supposed to have a certain skill set. Now, maybe he's not impressing them. Maybe he hasn't been good. It's hard to say. It would be nice to see what it looked like, though, for sure. I think late in the season is when you're going to see it more. Thor Woodenson says, offensive play calling and rhythm. Chiefs played a D we can beat, not copying the Bengals' defensive game plan. Early Chargers game, a screenplay everyone saw coming. Kelsey shovel pass fooled no one. Where are the Cincy D beaters? I would say, a lot of teams that aren't doing the exact same thing that Cincinnati did. And you got to remember, even with Cincinnati, the first half versus the second half, the Bengals defense showed a lot of the same looks from one half to the other. The Chiefs just played badly in the second half. The Bengals were dropping 8 and rushing 3 in the first half. They were refusing to blitz in the first half. They were utilizing cover 2 shells in the first half. The Chiefs just played like crap in the second half. That's the short story. There really isn't a magical formula there. And that's where, and we'll get to this eventually soon, actually, in the What Went Wrong article that I wrote, where I looked at all 31 of the failed offensive plays that the Chiefs had on Sunday. And what you see in a lot of them is sometimes the defense just made a play, but on well over half of their failed plays, it was an execution or schematic issue that you'd like to see fixed. And so really the Chiefs beat themselves against the Colts. This wasn't some magical defensive scheme or anything too special that the Colts did, outside of some plays where they really looked ready for some of Andy Reid's favorites. David Thomas said, is this, hey, we may not have a wide receiver 1, but we have a bunch of wide receivers 2, not turning out how we thought it would, and why is that? I would say because you want a wide receiver 2 to be a legitimate player who can beat man coverage. And outside of deep routes, I don't know if MVS is that guy. He wasn't really the guy you were counting on to be necessarily wide receiver 2, more like a really good wide receiver 3. Juju Smith-Schuster, I think, has played like a good wide receiver 2. But then outside of that, you just haven't had a lot of guys step up yet. And that's problematic. If you're going to do the wide receiver 2 over an elite superstar guy, you need like 3 good receivers, not one good receiver who really hasn't been worked into the offense enough, in my opinion. One kind of average-ish receiver, and then guys that aren't really doing a ton. So we'll see how things continue to develop. It is a tough offense to learn. And so I'm trying not to panic 3 weeks in, because I told myself not to do that before the season starts. But then when the season starts, you start to freak out, and that's only natural. Chillin' Chief. This is that. Dylan Dawson asked, which Chief would you take as a tag team partner in a WWE match? You know what? It's probably Trey Smith. I know he likes wrestling, or actually, no, it'd be Creed Humphrey. He was a star wrestler. So I'm going to go with Creed. The answer is always Creed Humphrey. That's apparently just how it goes. Chillin' Chief asks, is it me or does OBJ keep false starting but not being called part of the knee issue? He's always done that. He tries to time snaps really specifically, and it's constantly to the point where he's almost false starting. Mitch Schwartz used to do it all the time too. It's how he compensates for his lack of high-level agility, and it rarely gets called. I think it got called once this last game, but he rarely gets that called. He tries to get an exact jump on that. James P. says, do you think Nagy's return has brought a return of bad, weird running game choices, especially in short yardage plays? They're mostly gone, it seemed, but maybe that's just in my mind. I don't think so. I don't think Nagy has a lot of control over the offense. I think that's Reid's baby, and then Bieniemy's the biggest voice in the room. So I don't think it's a Nagy thing. Colin says, what happened to the screen game in Andy's offense? I would say that we've seen more of it over the last few weeks than we saw last year, by and large. We're seeing like 4 or 5 a game at this point. So I think it's actually starting to come back, which has been fun to see. Shantae Lamar Durham, and we've only got time for a couple more here, because if I don't get to that conference, actually really no one's going to do anything to me. But anyway, we're still going to try to get there because I said I'd go. By what week should we expect the offense to be in sync? Probably after the bye. Just because, and I think they're still going to be fine. They're going to do some good things, but I do think you're going to continue to see some of these ebbs and flows. And I think after the bye is when you're going to start to see things click more and more. Mike asked, do you think Orlando Brown will be in the league next year? Of course. Come on. I understand people are frustrated, but come on. Mahomes plus Witt Jr. equals happiness. Asks, if they're playing in Minnesota, will you be there? Probably. I've had a lot of people ask me that. If the Chiefs-Bucks game gets moved from Tampa, which I think is going to rely a lot on what the damage is like there, and anyone who happens to be watching in Florida, I've been praying for you guys. I understand these things are tough. Only talking about the football side of things seems weird, but that's my job, so that's what I do. If they do play in Minnesota, I'll probably drive down just because I rarely get a chance to only be a 3-hour drive from a Chiefs game. So odds are yes. One Husky dad, hey, me too, asks, do you think OBJ regrets not taking that contract offer now? I mean, maybe if he thinks it's an injury that's going to linger all season, then that's definitely going to be a problem for him. But he seems like a guy that's pretty confident in himself, um, and so I think he probably plans on playing through it and getting himself back to the level that he needs to be at. Scott Lawrence says lack of separation from receivers. Is it play calling or talent? Um, it hasn't quite been the lack of separation. Like they talked about it on the broadcast on Sunday. But what's funny is the snap where they talked about no one getting separation, Kelsey had separation. Now, of course, Kelsey's not a receiver. MVS has had separation on sometimes when he's been missed. Juju is getting some separation. Those two guys, they are doing a few things. And so I think the Colts had some good schematic stuff called up, but I do think there's been some execution issues. So I think that question makes an assumption that isn't quite accurate in that there are snaps where the receivers are getting separation. It's just been the entire offense has been just a little discombobulated. That said, they haven't been getting separation as much as I'd like against, an aggressive man coverage look. And that's why, because that's a problem they had last year. That's why I'd really like to see them get Sky more into the mix. All right. I don't have time to take any more questions. I'm sorry for those that I missed. I did want to talk very briefly. If you check out the Chief of the North newsletter, Minnesota Chiefs fan, MinnesotaChiefsFan.substack.com or bit.ly/Seth really hates money, which shout out to Briscoe for that. You will see I wrote an article called What Went Wrong, and you could just Google that, I guess, if you wanted. Well, although if you Google what went wrong, I bet you'd find a lot of stuff. So the title is What Went Wrong, looking at all 31 of the Chiefs' failed offensive plays. So basically what I did is I went through each failed snap, and by a failed snap, I mean something that 2 or less yards, stuffed run, incomplete pass. And I wrote about specifically what went wrong on each one, trying to identify patterns, trying to identify what went wrong. And what I came away with are a few overall conclusions, some of which I've actually discussed in this mailbag here. The biggest thing I wanted to go to is that there were failures by Mahomes. There were failures by the receivers. There were failures by Kelsey. Drops played a huge issue. If Justin Watson and Travis Kelsey each catch a couple of passes that they missed on back-to-back drives, Kelsey's was in the end zone. Watson's would have had them set up for first and goal inside the 10. The Chiefs probably put 10 more points on the board. And are we talking about the offense if they score 27 or if they score touchdowns on both drives and they put up 31? Are we even talking about the offense? That's how thin the line can be between success and failure in the NFL. So take a look at that because I talk about some of the schematic things that went wrong, some of the failures by Mahomes as well as the receivers. So you can check that out. That's all the time I have because once again, the lake is calling. Nah, I'm kidding. It's way too cold up here to go to the lake. It's like 45 degrees out there. But I do need to get to some legal seminaring. Thank you for watching as ever. I appreciate you guys as always. And remember, Sunday's loss aside, it is a great week to be a Chiefs fan.